Michael spoke about that far print of Dad holding the scythe. It reminded me of a couple of things. A couple of weeks ago, I was visiting my grandsons in British Columbia, and at one point, I was trying to explain to my 11-year-old grandson something about this, something about what my dad did to bring us about, and I mentioned a photo of him holding a scythe. And of course, you know what the question was from an 11-year-old. What's a scythe? How do you describe to an 11-year-old in 2023 what a scythe is? I gave up. And the other thing that print reminded me of is the scar I still have on this finger from when I was trying to sharpen that very side. Anyway, this is perfect. My dad would be so proud. When I was 8 or 9 years old, he built me a birthday present. It was a tractor. Not the kind that you push around on the floor, but it was about this high. And it actually maybe was more like the skeleton of the tractor. He had welded together lead pipes for the frame. He found bicycle pedals in a chain and rigged it up so that I could move it around. And there were lots of cotter pins and wheels that probably came from a kid's wagon. And he somehow welded together a steering wheel fit for my size at that age. And even though it was almost 70 years ago, well, maybe it was a little more, I still remember how excited I was. I hadn't thought about that tractor in years, maybe decades, but for some reason it came to mind last week when I was trying to think about what I wanted to tell you about my dad and his photography. He was a farmer, of course. His formal education ended with high school. His work on the farm was often tedious and hard and sometimes kept him away from school for weeks at a time. But he was an avid reader and he had a creative imagination. And I imagined him making a sketch of this tractor for me and casting about for materials that he found in the various scrap heaps in his shop. And after he had painted it green and yellow to match our John Deere, I imagined the satisfaction he must have felt looking at his creation. Like lots of farmers, some of you in this room understand this, Dad could fix things in ingenious ways, but I like to think his imagination made him better at it than most, For some of our mundane tasks on the farm, however, there was no room for freelancing. He rarely raised his voice, but he made it clear jobs had to be done right. I could never get away with digging a post hole 35 inches deep. It had to be 36, even if I hit solid rock at 35. And when I first helped paint the barn, I remember him telling me I was spreading on that thick red paint too thin. Those old boards were porous. He said, slap it on heavy, let it soak in and slap on some more. That turned out to be pretty much my kind of painting, actually. It was hard, tedious work, of course, but then there was that sort of whimsical idea that brought to life that tractor for me. And, of course, there were his photographs. Dad was born in 1914 when life and history still moved slowly, and he lived until 2004, having seen changes that were unimaginable when he was a kid. I will get through this. Automobiles, airplanes, tractors, yes, and cameras, with all the magic they could produce in the hands of someone with vision and skill. Thank you, Robin. Jim Lott was blessed with that vision and skill. He probably would have scoffed if somebody called him an artist. But with camera in hand, that's what he was, as you can see. In a life full of the hardest kinds of work, he found escape and fulfillment in photography, transforming ordinary moments into small monuments. Thanks to my dad, I too was smitten with photography. In my early teens, he taught me to develop film and a trade in total darkness. After a few minutes of mystical hope and faith, we would turn on the dim red safe light, hold up the wet film, and breathe a silent sigh of relief as our negatives came into view. For both of us, the dark room was a place where magic happened. Thinking back on those days reminded me of a passage in the autobiography he wrote for his family late in life. This is what he wrote about building his first darkroom in 1937. I made an enlarger, he said, out of an old bellows camera and rigged up a lamp house from an oil pan with the help of Heinzelman's blacksmith shop. I made an adjustable means of raising and lowering the enlarger with a pipe T and a set screw. It worked and gave good service. He built that darkroom in the farmhouse where he was born, where he grew up without his father present, but with a devoted mother, a twin sister, his grandmother, and a stern grandfather who treated him like the son he never had and nicknamed him Jim for reasons nobody ever knew. As many of you know, Dad's birthplace still sits back from the Fairfield Road and what is now Granite Hill Family Campground, another of Dad's original creations, this one in loving partnership with his wife Pauline, our late mother. And as I was driving down today, I saw a sign, a billboard that called our old farm Granite Hill Camping Resort, which made me think of palm trees and little drinks with umbrellas in them. I don't know, maybe things have, maybe the affair out there has changed. But it was Granite Hill Family Campground, and we all knew it. And he said in his autobiography that each move he made after he was married, he would upgrade his darkroom. But none of them, he wrote, can match the thrill of my first crude darkroom. I want to tell you where it all started for him. He traced his love of photography to the winter of 1937 when he left the farm for 2 months to enroll in a speech therapy school in Toronto, not far from where I live. It was his first time away from home. His Toronto experience cured the stutter in his speech and infected him with the photography bug. When he was in Toronto, he once told me one of his classmates had a Kodak camera and took photos of Dad and his classmates, then took them out to be processed and got them back the next day. It lit a fire under me, he said. When Dad returned from Canada, he fed that fire. Thus began a remarkable journey that saw him become a devoted but largely unsung photographer of agricultural life in Adams County. For me, his self-portraits were among his most remarkable photos. He made selfies before anybody called them selfies. While working in a barn or field, he would stop and set up a photo using his self-timer on the camera to carefully create a portrait that showed him as he wished to be remembered. Framed in the steering wheel of a tractor, silhouetted in a barn door, pitchfork in hand, sitting in the woods with his deer rifle at the ready, his coat collar turned up against the wind. Those elegant selfies, as well as his striking agricultural landscapes, tell us much about a man with a remarkable eye for composition and for history, his own and his county's. As I came to understand in my own early years, a farmer's daily work left him alone with nature in a way that fostered distinctive relationships with the soil, trees, sky, and seasons. Working in the fields, whether with horses or tractor, provided Dad with vast stretches of time to form lasting images of an environment that absorbed him in a unique way. With his camera and his darkroom, he made a remarkable record of those images. Finally, I wanted to share a bit with you about the origin story that brought us all here for this event. Let's start with Kate McCaffrey, who is with us today. Back there, give us a wave, Kate. Kate was excited when she first saw Dad's photos at a dinner party, and she called Bob McElhenney, who visited my parents, viewed the portraits, and got excited too. Then Bob contacted Larry Knudsen, whose elegant essay about Dad's work you'll find in your program. That's the short version of a fascinating story. I'm sure Bob and Kate would be happy to fill in the blanks after I'm done here, which I promise will be soon. Bob was responsible for the first public exhibition of Dad's photos almost exactly 20 years ago at the Adams County Agricultural Center. Dad was in the last year of his life, and his cognition had started to dim. But he was a happy man that day, and he spent the afternoon smiling as many old friends came around to tell him what a terrific photographer he was and a friend. He looked humble and he looked proud, and he would be humble and proud of all this. So Kate got the ball rolling, and Bob picked it up, and Larry took it over the goal line. Larry preserved Dad's photos and negatives for our family for the next 20 years. Last year, we decided it was time to search for a permanent home for the collection, and to our great delight, we found it here. Thanks to Robin Wagner and her staff, who rolled out the welcome mat when we came calling. My siblings are all here today: Fred, Carol, Nancy, and Doug, several members of their families. We wouldn't have missed this for the world. And I want to thank Kate McCaffrey and Bob McElhenney and Larry Knudsen and Robin Wagner and their staff at the library. Each of you played a very important part in making this celebration come to pass. And thank all of you for coming to celebrate with us. In closing, I'd like to quote something that Kate told me the other day. She said, "When I saw those photographs, it became very apparent to me that they were very, very special, and I wanted as many people as possible to see them." Today, Kate's wish and the wishes of our family have come true, and Dad finally gets to go to college. Thank you.